We are embarking on the Civil War history of Knoxville, Tennessee. There were 3 battles and 1 raid that took place. These will be broken up into battles for Lenoir Station, Campbell Station, and Fort Sanders, and Sanders Raid. Come along with us as we begin the fight for the heart of East Tennessee. All aboard the Kentucky-Tennessee Living Time Machine. Please fasten your seatbelts and keep your arms and legs inside of the vehicle at all times. But to get going, we need your help. We still need to fire up that time machine to help transport us. Please help us by clicking on the like, subscribe, and bell notification buttons down below. Not only does this help fire up the time machine, but it convinces the YouTube algorithm that we need a bigger time machine to reach more people who love history as much as you do. Now, back to our story. Lincoln's Plea. President Abraham Lincoln and other government authorities from the very early days of the Civil War constantly urged the Union generals in charge of the war to invade and protect East Tennessee. There were 2 major reasons why Washington, D.C. felt that this was a very important area to protect. The first reason was that there were 2 major railways that passed through the area. The East Tennessee and Georgia Railroad connected Knoxville and Chattanooga, Tennessee to Dalton, Georgia. The East Tennessee and Virginia Railroad connected Knoxville with Bristol, Virginia. The second reason was that the area was mainly full of residents that were Unionist supporters. Under the regime of the Confederacy, they were having to endure raids of their homes, arrests of the men, and other indignities. Even though the rest of the state of Tennessee was supporting the Confederacy, East Tennessee remained loyal to the end to Washington, D.C. The logistics problem. The Cumberland Plateau is not a very easy area to gain access to. Surrounded by the Appalachian Mountains, there were no other railroads connecting this area to the outside world. The wagon roads were difficult, if not impassable, in the inclement weather. This would pose a potential issue for the invading Union forces, as supply lines could easily be attacked or delayed. There were plans that were encouraged by Lincoln to build a railroad. However, these plans were scrapped as it was deemed to take too much time to build this railroad in such treacherous conditions. The Union 23rd Corps and the Army of the Ohio. Major General George Lucas Hartsuff was placed in command of the newly formed 23rd Corps on April 27, 1863. This unit would join with the 9th Corps from the Eastern Theater to form the Army of the Ohio and under the command of Major General Ambrose Burnside. The plan was to hit East Tennessee on 2 fronts at the same time. Burnside was tasked to invade East Tennessee on the same day that the Army of the Cumberland was ordered to capture Chattanooga, Tennessee. As I have said, that was the plan. But as with anything concerning Burnside, that was not how it went. Vicksburg delayed the plans. On June 2, 1863, Burnside and his Army of the Ohio left Burnside's headquarters in Cincinnati, Ohio. The very next day, instead of following Lincoln's orders and marching into East Tennessee, Burnside received orders and sent 8,000 of his men from the 9th Corps under the command of Major General John Parke to assist General Grant with the siege of Vicksburg. This caused a delay in the invasion of East Tennessee until August 16th. However, earlier in May of 1863, 9th Corps Brigadier General Orlando B. Wilcox recommended that Colonel William P. Sanders take command of an operation to invade East Tennessee, with the mission to destroy important railroad bridges around the Knoxville, Tennessee area to make the supply trains for the Confederate Army stop running. Colonel Sanders was appointed commander of the 5th Kentucky Cavalry Regiment on March 4, 1863. Under this recommendation, Burnside ordered a cavalry raid which destroyed railroad bridges east and west of Knoxville, Tennessee. Sanders' forces. On June 14, 1863, Sanders left Mount Vernon, Kentucky with 1,500 Union mounted soldiers and 2 artillery guns from the following regiments: The 1st Tennessee Infantry Regiment under the command of Colonel Robert K. Byrd. 44th Ohio Infantry Regiment under the command of Major Alpheus S. Moore. The 112th Illinois Infantry Regiment under the command of Major Tristan T. Dow. 2nd Ohio Cavalry Regiment under the command of Captain David E. Welsh. 7th Ohio Cavalry Regiment under the command of Captain Richard C. Rankin. 1st Kentucky Cavalry Regiment under the command of Captain George Dry. Battery D, 1st Ohio Light Artillery Conkles under the command of Lieutenant Henry C. Lloyd. Sanders took a supply wagon train containing forage and other provisions with him from Mount Vernon to Williamsburg, Kentucky. They covered a distance of 60 miles, following the Cumberland River. When the troops were in Williamsburg, Sanders ordered a supply wagon train to return with a guard of 200 horsemen. Sanders and Buckner. Sanders knew that Brigadier General Simon Bolivar Buckner, who was department commander of the forces guarding the border of Tennessee, would hear of the Union movements. Using this information, Sanders created a diversion. Using another unit of federal forces, rode south of Williamsburg, Kentucky, towards Big Creek Gap, Tennessee. This worked, and Buckner was fooled by the ruse, in that he moved the majority of his troops to Clinton, Tennessee, just 15 miles to the northwest outside of Knoxville. Sanders and his men passed west of Buckner at Huntsville, Tennessee. Colonel Sanders' first raid, Wartburg. In the evening hours of June 17, 1863, Sanders and his men arrived near Montgomery, Tennessee. Shortly after arriving in Montgomery, Sanders received news that there was a Confederate cavalry unit that was camped nearby at Wartburg. Sanders ordered 400 men from the 1st Tennessee under the command of Colonel Robert K. Byrd to attack the Confederate troops. The men did a surprise attack which was in their favor. There were 2 officers, one of which was an aide to General Pegram, and 102 enlisted men that were captured in that raid, which were paroled. Their horses were seized. The men also captured 60 boxes of artillery ammunition and tools, 500 spades, and 100 picks, which they destroyed, several thousand pounds of bacon, salt, flour, and meal, and some corn, and other public stores, and 6 wagons with mule teams. There were a few of the command of this troop who were some distance away from the main camp. However, they were able to escape notice with their horses. These soldiers would go on to sound the first alarm that Sanders and his men were in the area. As the men grew closer to Kingston, Tennessee, it was discovered that Colonel John S. Scott's Confederate Cavalry Brigade was nearby. Scott's forces were guarding the ford at Clinch River and had 1 battery with them. Not wanting to engage a potentially overwhelming force, Sanders had his men to cross Clinch River 8 miles away from Scott at Waller's Ford. Sanders' second raid, Lenoir Station. The plan to destroy the East Tennessee and Georgia Railroad Bridge located in Loudon, Tennessee had to be scrapped. It was too heavily guarded by the 16th Alabama Infantry. This infantry had the force of 3 regiments and 8 pieces of artillery. They had been entrenched in the area for 2 weeks and had been able to dig rifle pits, ditches, and strengthen the works there. The commanding officer's courier had been captured by Sanders' men, and it was discovered that there were orders that the forces at Kingston was to follow the rear of Sanders' troops, and that the troops of Lenoir Station had been ordered to join forces at Loudon. After learning about this information, the raid on Loudon was scrapped. The bridge would remain guarded until the invasion of General Ambrose Burnside in September of 1863. So, a secondary target was planned for this raid. On June 19, 1863, at 8 a.m., Sanders' men descended upon Lenoir Station 30 minutes after the troops had left for Loudon. Sanders' men were able to capture a detachment of artillerymen with 3 iron 6-pounder field guns, 8 officers, 57 enlisted men. Sanders' men then left a path of destruction through the town that included destroying the depot, the general store, and the railroad car containing Confederate military supplies. Inside of the large brick depot, there were found 5 pieces of artillery with harnesses and saddles, ammunition, and military equipment. Also found within the depot was 2,500 stand of small arms, a very large amount of artillery and musket ammunition, and artillery and cavalry equipments. Inside of the railroad car was found saddles and artillery harness. They were able to cut the telegraph line, seize 75 horses and mules belonging to the Confederate States. Sanders had ordered his men to spare the brick cotton mill on the alleged grounds that he wished to protect the only source of cloth making for the local residents, who were Union sympathizers. However, it was later learned that the cotton mill was destroyed in a fire. It is not clear if this was accidental or by mistake. On their way out of town, the Union forces would stop every mile and cut the telegraph line, and would tear up the railroad track on their continued journey towards Knoxville, Tennessee. Next week, we will pick up with Sanders' raid continuing towards Knoxville and the wave of destruction that they would leave in their path. This would give Burnside valuable information on how to proceed with the battles and the capture of Knoxville. Thank you. We at Kentucky Tennessee Living would like to thank you for watching our video series on the Appalachian Civil War battles. Don't forget to hit that like button, as the more likes we receive, the more likely YouTube is to suggest our videos to other viewers. Also, to receive notice when we upload a new video, be sure to subscribe and click the bell notification. We thank you for continuing to support Kentucky Tennessee Living as we are discovering the mysteries in Appalachian history.